There are formally over 120 rebel groups at this very hour. We're fighting civil wars across the planet. There are so many wildfires breaking out, erupting ecologically, biologically, that we don't know where to turn first in terms of priorities. But the one thing that I think was beautifully stated earlier was the gecko hypothesis. I like that very much. And I think if, as Albert Schweitzer himself said, you are willing to be condemned as a sentimentalist, then you're on the right track. It means that you could spend a whole day following an ant at play. It means you could spend months and lose yourself in a forest. You could spend years and lose yourself on the leaf of every manuscript, which was the book that John Muir described as Yosemite. I'm going to turn it over to Jane for a while.
You're on a roll, but I have one thing to add, inspired by Mark Lee's reference to observing the gecko, which is so beautiful and so apt. We're surrounded here by students, by educators, by inspired scholars. And I sometimes wonder, in the photograph of me that you see in the bio, I'm with an orangutan in central Borneo. We were with Urgute Galdikas, who took us on an amazing journey through her world and the world of the orangutan and the other creatures who still inhabit those forests. I wonder sometimes if our best teachers, if our best mentors, aren't our human companions, but those creatures that we meet in the forest who show only kindness, love, and generosity. And I don't just speak of an orangutan who is not a meat eater, but I grew up in the Santa Monica Mountains, and I played with, believe it or not, a pack of coyotes as a child. I never felt fear. Obviously I wasn't in peril. I'm here. As part of nature and the natural world, I think it's important to extend our loving hearts and generosity to all of those creatures who inhabit this forest with us and share this wonderful world that we hope to see endure in the today, not merely the tomorrow.
Let's take questions.
I have a friend that goes to Costa Rica every year to visit one of those companies. I have a friend that goes to Costa Rica every year for the environmental tourism, and I was wondering if you could talk on the topic. Should we be asking tens of thousands of people to go to all of these sensitive places across the world and be explorers like yourself? What are your views?
This is a double bind. This is really a double bind. We did a film together some years ago, early in our relationship, friendship, and collaboration. And it was about this very subject. It was about ecotourism in Antarctica. And what we observed was that the ecotourists were beginning to get, in our view, in our opinions, far too close to the wildlife, whom we were all there to admire. On the other hand, I do think that there are tremendous benefits to ecotourism because I think it provides a sustainable living for indigenous peoples. It helps people to celebrate, it teaches people to celebrate nature in the natural world. I have not been to Costa Rica. Michael, you have. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, a recent study came out a few weeks ago from the Nature Conservancy in England where they examined 400 allegedly sustainable win-win situations for indigenous peoples, of which there's over 350 million left on the planet. at last count, so to speak. And the different mechanisms, whether clean development mechanisms under United Nations RED and cap and trade and other forms of income generation for indigenous peoples, as well as those of us who are not so-called indigenous living in megacities. And out of the 400 projects, only 2 were deemed to work. Very discouraging news. Much of it was hinged on ecotourism. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago you can read online in Forbes about ecotourism as one of the bubbles, and I looked at the Maldives as an example. And as I'm sure most of you know, the Maldives will probably be one of the first nations in the world to disappear because of climate change. The entire revenue stream of that country currently hinges upon ecotourism, 5-star hotels, and people of all financial persuasions flocking there to see some of the last great underwater ecosystems on the planet. Tragically, the 110,000 or so people in Mali, the Islamic capital, democratic capital of the Maldives, is right on the edge of going underwater. The president has been sending billions of dollars in a trust fund to Sri Lanka because he knows the entire population of that country is going to have to leave their homeland very soon. Ecotourism bubbles are just that. They are bubbles. We've seen in Madagascar, in northern Brazil, on Easter Island, which is now Chile, examples where it can work. The top-down issue is where the revenue is going and what level and significant participation is taking place by the people there who are doing their best to not only save indigenous wildlife, but to share their own love and enthusiasm and expert systems, if you will, with people like ourselves who visit these extraordinary places. But let's put that in context. Costa Rica is the only country in the world, to answer your question, that has actually found a mechanism by which indigenous people can be compensated realistically in this economy for not cutting down primary forests. There's no other country in the world, with the exception of Bhutan in the Himalayas, that has managed that, and one other country. There was an image you saw of a person in tennis shoes on a cliff over a huge forest. That's Suriname, which still has 95% of its tropical rainforests intact. There aren't too many other examples like that. So if you think you're going on an ecotourist vacation or a study abroad program or some kind of outing involving the transfer of money where you've been told that money is going to go to an indigenous group, there's a lot of questions you might want to think about asking whoever's leading that trip, whatever organization is leading that trip. Number 1, nutritional illiteracy among young girls. Are young girls being oppressed? Are they getting the same educational benefits as their male counterparts? Are they getting the same amount of food at the dinner table as their male counterparts? You may want to find out about clear cutting, secondary versus tertiary forest, and what that forest is being cut down for, and what species in particular are being afflicted. You may want to do some research and homework as to what endemic species are there. And the best way to find all of that on one easy website is Population Reference Bureau, PRB, where you'll see about 100 different indices relating to family health, demography, population issues, total fertility rates, national reproductive rates, which relate specifically to girls, young girls. A lot of questions you need to ask before you just willy-nilly go on a vacation and call it ecotourism.
However, having said all that, we still highly recommend it.
Because you're forced.
No, because
Everyone in this room is an expert.
I do think that it's a benefit for all of us to have contact with other cultures. By culture, I'm not referring merely to human culture, by the way. And I do think that there is a likely boon to the people living in those places which we visit, to a greater or lesser degree.
Other questions?